Is that what it means by hospitality? I don't think that's what it means. I think it means an attitude of service to help people in a non-grudging manner, okay? To be able to demonstrate and to receive them, to be kind and generous to them. It's an attitude of how to deal with people. It's interesting there in 1 Timothy chapter 3, he says that the bishop should be of good behavior, okay? In conjunction with that. So you see there in verse 8, he says, but a lover of hospitality. And then he says, secondly, a lover of what? Of good men. Okay? Now, I didn't put anything up there for that because it's pretty self-explanatory. Okay? A lover of good men. The Greek expression simply means loving goodness according to the Strong's Concordance. So, should the bishop, should the elders of the local church be down and hanging around and consorting with what the book of Acts calls lewd fellows of the baser sort? Okay? Now don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that the bishop or the elder, the leaders of the local church, should not have relationships with sinners. You understand? How do people get saved? They get saved by hearing what? The gospel. So if all you're ever doing is hanging around with a bunch of saved people, then how is anybody ever going to hear the gospel? Okay? When it says there, notice what it says. It says, a lover of what? Show me who someone's friends with, and I will be able to determine a lot about the character and nature of that individual. Okay? Show me who someone is friends with. Show me who someone hangs out with on a regular basis and who is allowed to have influence and input into their life. And I will be able to determine a lot of things about that person just based on who they hang around with, correct? That is the idea here, okay? It is not saying that the elders should never associate with sinners. That's not saying that at all. What it's saying is, when you look at who they have as their sort of, in their circle of close acquaintances, people that they care a lot about, you need to pay attention to the fact that they need to be a lover of what kind of people? Good people. Okay, that's the idea. Look at what else it says there. The wind blew this. Verse 8. But a lover of hospitality, a lover of good men, and then it says, what's the next one? Sober. Okay? Most of the time, if you and I hear the word sober, we usually think of it in reference to what? If somebody is sober, we typically think of it in relationship to them not being intoxicated. Okay? Now, he just said, we'll go back to verse 7. He just said, for the bishop then must be blameless as the steward of God, not self-willed, not soon angry, not given to what? Now, would it seem a bit redundant here for him to say sober if he meant the same thing that he just meant in verse 7? Okay? The word sober, in this sense, deals with one's mental state. To be sober-minded is what it's referring to. Not necessarily to alcohol. Now, certainly does an abundance of alcohol affect someone's ability to think soundly. Okay? It's definitely related, but it's not specifically what it's dealing with. Sober means, essentially, of sound mind. One who is sane. One who has their wits about them or their senses about them. It also, secondly, has the idea of curbing one's desires or impulses or having self-control. Come with me, if you would, to 1 Timothy chapter 3. Come with me to 1 Timothy chapter 3 and look again at chapter 3, verse 2. 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 2. A bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, vigilant, what's the next word? Sober, of good behavior, given to hospitality, apt to teach. Come with me back to the book of Titus. Look at chapter 2. Titus chapter 2. Titus chapter 2, look at verse 2. Titus 2:2, notice, the aged, verse 1, but speak thou the things which become sound doctrine. Verse 2, that the aged men be what? Sober, grave, look at the next word, temperate. It's interesting when you study the verses that you see the word sober there in verse 2, and 2 words later it says what? Temperate. The word temperate here is the same word that in chapter 1 verse 8 is translated sober. So what does it mean to be sober? It means to be temperate, okay? The word temperate, it has the idea of being moderate or not marked by excesses, okay? Same chapter 2, look at verse 5. Now there's an instruction here to the women. And he says in verse 5, to be discreet, chaste, keepers at home, good, obedient to their own husbands, that the word of God be not blasphemed. You see there in verse 5 when it says discreet? That word discreet is the same word that's translated temperate in verse 2, and it's the same word that's translated sober in chapter 1 verse 8. So when it says then that the bishop must be sober, what is it referring to? It's referring to the fact that he is temperate, that he has excess. He doesn't do anything to the excess per se, okay? And it also has the idea of being discreet. That's what it means. So, do you want someone who's going to go running around blabbing everyone's personal business? No. That's not the idea here. You want somebody who's going to be what? Discreet. Who's going to exercise judgment. Who's going to be temperate. Who's going to be able to know what to say and when to say it and to who to say it. All right? So, that's the ideas there when it says about being sober. Come back with me to chapter 1, verse 8. Look, I said to you last Sunday, I teach this stuff. I taught it to you last Sunday. I'm teaching it to you now. And it's sort of like, geez, should I really be doing this? Should any of us really be doing this? Okay? The idea here, again, if you are going to take that list and you are going to say that everybody, that somebody has to meet all of these things and do this all the time and never allow any latitude for them to make mistakes and sometimes not do things the way that they should, then you're never going to have anybody in a local church that's going to be able to do anything. Okay? Now, those are standards. Those are things that the elders and the bishops should be known by. But to hold them to some sort of saintly standard where they are never going to screw up and their sin nature is never going to get the best of them, just like it does you, is an unrealistic expectation. Okay? But these are the things that need to be characteristic of the individuals that are going to fill these offices. And then he says in verse 8, after sober, he says just. Now I do have something up here behind me on this. The Greek word translated just carries many meanings according to the Strong's Concordance. All right? Some of the more pertinent meanings, given the context, include, number one, in a wide sense, upright, righteous, virtuous, keeping the commandments of God. Okay? And then there's a few things underneath there that I want you to be aware of. He discusses the fact that they should be the definition of just also involves innocent or faultless. It is used of him whose way of thinking, feeling, and acting is wholly conformed to the will of God, and therefore needs no correction in the heart or in life. Again, whoever meets that all the time. In a narrow sense, rendering to each his due, and that is in a judicial sense, or passing just judgment on others.